Hello, class. This will be a video on constructing your blocks or the um, shipping container at eye level. So just pretend for a moment that this drawing right here is your photograph. Okay. I didn't have I couldn't really show it very well from my camera screen. It just was all washed out. So just pretend that this is like one of your photographs. So if you take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, this is a good size to work with. And draw your horizon line. And then maybe a half inch from the ends, make your vanishing points. Okay. This will give you a drawing that is about the right size for your presentation. And before you start, take a colored pencil and draw yourself a grid. Be very careful you don't end up with a curved line. I've got one in here that's pretty curved, but just take your time and make a nice straight line and just a random uh, configuration, a few below the horizon line and most of them above. You might have to add one, but this will make it much easier to project your lines to the vanishing point because you'll have a nearby guide to go by. Okay, so step one, pick out your closest uh, edge that's closest to you in the photograph. And in this case, it'd be this one right here. And make your edge about an inch and a half, in a little bit. An inch is going to be too small. Okay, so make it a little bit bigger. Make it about an inch and a quarter, whatever, because we're going to add to it below the horizon. But that's the next step. Okay, so here's this edge right here. Now I'm drawing darker than I would normally, but just so you can see it, I would sketch it in lightly. And it doesn't necessarily have to coincide with your grid. Mine just happens to fall right on that. Okay. That's just coincidental. So this edge is this edge. So I can now project this edge right here. These go to a vanishing point out here. Well, it's the same vanishing point, which would be here. We're just at a different eye level. Here we're up in a helicopter. Here we're at eye level or street level. So I can sketch in this line right here. Now, again, I'm making them darker than they need to be. You should do them lightly. Otherwise, you'll be erasing heavy lines. Okay, and then just estimate what this distance is. It needs to look like a believable, approximately a square. So I'm getting right about there. So nothing below the horizon. This is an easy method to make it look like it's eye level. Okay, so you can see where this is the cube, or this is the 10 footer right in here. If you can see that, that's the 10 footer sitting here. So this line goes to the opposite vantage point, the left-hand vanishing point. So I'll just, again, that's coincidental that it's on my grid line. So I'm making these light, dark for you. So if this is 8 feet across here, this is 10 feet. I'm going to make it about like this. This is your power of estimation. Remember the workbook? That's why I had you do things where you estimate distances and estimate proportions. Okay, you got to develop that eye for it. Okay, so now I'm at this corner right here, and so I want to draw this line. Here's the other 10 footer sitting back in here. So that comes out. This goes to that same vanishing point, which would be this one. So I've got the two grid lines. I can kind of eyeball that. And again, if it falls on your grid line, that's just coincidental. So I'm right about here. And just stop. Make sure your verticals are all parallel. Back to the workbook. Okay. Now the next line I want to draw, again, I'm drawing the cube, everything on the ground. This line right here, that's going to go to the left-hand vanishing point. You can see where all these lines that are parallel all go to the left-hand vanishing point. So that's going to come down, I'd say right about. And again, this is 8 feet across here. So this would be the 10 feet. Estimating right about there. Okay, so I've got this point right here. Now this point, that goes back to the same vanishing point over here. And this is the third 10-footer. So again, this comes out at this angle. And notice how this is narrower, the whole 10-footers here. So this needs to look a little bit narrower. Okay. I think I got that about right. And then this line, again, goes to the left-hand vanishing point. And let's eyeball that right about here. Because this isn't the 8 feet. The 8 feet actually goes back into here a little bit. Okay. And this is the 10 feet. Now mine's a little off because if this is 10 feet and this is 10 feet, this should look smaller than this because this is closer. So let me change this a little bit. This is where, as you're drawing this, look at it and it's got to look believable. So I'm going to make that about there. It should look a little bit smaller than this one here. Okay, so I got that much. I'm going to do 2 of these. I've got another one. It's a different configuration, so it's a little bit different than the 3 blocks on the bottom. I've got one where there's 2 20s on the, or yeah, 2 20-footers and a 10-footer. Okay, the next step, we need to locate, let's locate this point right here. It's about halfway, so that would be right about here. Remember this, okay, a little offside here. Remember, if you want to find the exact center, you draw 2 diagonals. That's the exact center right there. But I'm just going by what this looks like. Okay, so right there. And that's going to be a vertical line going up. And then see how this extends? It's an extension of that line. So I can extend that up. And then this is an extension of this line off of that shipping container, which would be here. So now I've located this point right here, which would be right here. It's the intersection of these 2 lines. Straight up. Now, since this line is closer in space than this line will be slightly larger. So, if you really want to get a little more accurate, just take another piece of paper and mark that. And then this one's going to be just slightly taller. Not a whole lot. Okay, so I made it maybe 1/8 of an inch taller. And now I've got to swing around. I'm repositioning myself, so I'm looking straight down between these 2 points. This is another exercise that harkens back to the workbook. You're connecting 2 points. Remember, I showed you to look at the point you're going to. Couple dry runs, kind of get it going. Okay, I've got it nailed right there. Same with this side. So now I've got this point located. See, I kind of do a dry run, get the arm going in the right direction. I got it right about there. And look where this ends back here. It goes beyond this point right here is this point, and it goes beyond that. Well, I can't see that. So if I project this back inside, let's call it right there. Let's call this point. See that projection of the 20-footer? That would be this point right here. So I'm going to just eyeball it now right about there. And then darken the whole thing in. Now this looks off to me. This doesn't, Maybe I need to make it taller. See how this looks? This doesn't look 8 feet compared to 9 feet 6 right here. So I could either make it, I'm not going to do that. I could make it a little bit taller, or I could cheat over here a little bit. You can cheat a little bit. That looks a little better. Okay, so I've got it right there. Now, this is without the bottom. I need to put the bottom of this on. This is an easy way to begin a street level view of a building. Because sometimes you get inaccuracies when you're so close to the vanishing point or the horizon line that, use a ruler here. You're so close to the horizon line that your inaccuracies really magnify. So this is a method I found that's kind of easy. So let's take, just go down slightly. I'd say right about there. This gives you more dramatic. In fact, this is actually below eye level. Eye level would be up about in here. If this is 9'6", eye level is about up in here, from here to here. Okay. So I'm actually making eye level way down here, but it gives it a nice dramatic feel to it. Or this might be how it would look if the tiny house sat on a rise or a little bit of a hill where you're down lower than the normal eye level. Anyway, so I'm just arbitrarily going down that far below the horizon line right here. Okay, I've got my grid lines, so that follows that. And basically, if you're close to a grid line, you can kind of make it almost parallel, and that'll get you pretty close. Okay, now this one, see how you can be off just a little bit. That's why we start with the top first. I'm just doing dry runs. Okay, I got it. So that goes back to there. And again, I'm darkening this in as I go, but you should keep it light and then go back over it. Okay, now this, so I'm here, right, on the ground right here. So I need this line, which goes to the right vanishing point. See, if this is off, here's what's going to happen. And again, don't use a ruler. I want you to get skilled at freehand drawing. Okay. Look how much longer it takes for me to line these up and draw it. You need to get good at drawing freehand. On some of our later drawings that we're going to do maybe this big or even larger, then we'll use a ruler. Okay. But you can see how if I'm off a little bit, that'll throw off the next line. So this is how you get good at it, though, just by doing it. So that looks pretty close right there. Drop that line down. Okay, this needs to go. I could have drawn another grid line in there. Right about like that. Now, this point is this point. Now that's going to go to the right vanishing point. Carefully, you don't start aiming up. Look at it. If it's going up like this, you're wrong. Now this point right here is this point. They don't connect to the point on the horizon. That's the mistake some of you might make. It doesn't go up to the horizon. It goes to the vanishing point. And see, I'm close enough to that grid line. I can go almost parallel, and it's close enough. Okay, there it is. Look at the dramatic sensation you get looking up at this towering building. And I love the way this looks. You know, this is great for like a huge window overlooking the Appalachian Mountains. Just imagine this, right? Okay, I think that's probably enough. And then you can go ahead and darken it in. Now this is, you want it nice and dark. Here's what I would do. I would darken it with an ink pen because you want to be able to trace this on the marker paper. Pencil won't show through. So you really need to darken this with your ink pen. And that's with your ink, that's going to give you another chance to kind of straighten out some of these lines nice and straight. So that'll be much easier to trace. If you leave it pencil, it won't show through that tracing paper as well. Okay. Okay, that's that one. Now, let me reset up everything here. Just take a second. So I'll do a second video on the rendering. I probably won't get to that until the following day. So we'll get rid of this and get this set up. Now my sketch here is a little smaller. A little bit different configuration for those of you who have a different look to your setup here. Okay, that looks good. Okay, again, you're going to put your vanishing or your horizon line down near the bottom of the page. This is just for your tracing. Okay. I don't know if you can see this or not. Okay, yeah, I'll just show that to you as long as I got it here. Here's a rough light pencil I did just to kind of see where I put the trees, but you can see it's basically close to what I had. And I forgot to mention, if you can see your deck, put the railing in. Here's the railing I did, just really simple. A double line for the framework around it. Maybe a triple line for maybe a post in the middle, and then maybe just some metal bars. Keep it real simple, something like that. I forgot to mention that. I'm not going to trace all this thing, but you can see that's what I'm going to have when I render it, something similar to that. Okay, let's do this one real quick. Okay, horizon line down near the bottom, and just make it parallel to the bottom of the page. And again, I'm making this darker so you can see it. Vanishing point's about half inch from the edge. Okay. I'm making this grid darker so that you can see it. You can make it very light. Be aware that you don't want to end up with the arc on your lines. Be very conscious of keeping them straight. Kind of hit a bump in the paper there. Once you start getting good at this, you can draw lines pretty quickly. But you got to be very accurate with this. Because that's your grid underneath. At least it gives you a rough guide, right? Yeah, it's good to start with. Okay, whoops. There we go. Okay, the closest point to you on the ground would be this point or this line right here. So and don't start it in the middle, because you can see that's not the middle of the drawing. Here's the width of the drawing. It's over here. So position it likewise, closer to this vanishing point. And remember, you're going from the horizon line up. So about 1.5 inches or so. And if it happens to coincidentally fall on a grid line, so be it. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is this line right here, and that's going to follow this vanishing point. Or, yeah, to this vanishing point. And let's see. And you can see I've got a 10-foot container right here. Here's a 20-footer on the ground, and then a 20-footer sitting on top. Let's make that about yay. And then this goes to the right vanishing point. All these lines go to the right vanishing point. But see how I'm doing that? I'm just lightly putting it in, getting it started. And the first couple strokes, I can kind of gauge where I'm headed. Let's see. So this is 10 feet here, and this is the 8 feet. So let's try right about there. Okay, so I've got this point located right in here. Now I need to come out here. Locate this point. And then this goes to the right vanishing point. And that brings me up to about here. So because see how you can see this little corner peeking out right here? Because we're rotating downward, it's on the other side of this container. You can't see it anymore. Okay, the 20-footer sitting on top, it's right in the middle. So I'm going to use the diagonal method because I want it to be accurate. Do diagonals and then project straight up. So when you do this, this distance should be greater than this distance because distances get smaller in perspective. This will be larger than this. So from there, that's this line right here. And then see how it projects right along that line? That's this line right here. And where these two lines meet, that will be that corner. So let's project this one up. Okay. So now I've got this corner located, which is right here. And that projects straight up. Now, in perspective, if you have the vanishing points too close, you'll start getting weird distortions and the angles will look really wonky. But I've practiced this a couple of times, and this is a good proportion on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and about that size that we're using for the height. Okay, so remember, since this line is closer to you than this line, this will be a little longer than this one. So just to keep it more accurate, I'm not going to eyeball that. I'm actually going to measure this. So this is the same height as this, but because this is closer, it's actually going to be up about here. I'm just eyeballing, just a little bit taller. Okay, and then what I'm doing, I'm rotating my body, so I'm looking right down this. My line of sight is right down this angle right here, from here to the vanishing point. Don't use a ruler. You're gaining your skill by just doing it freehand. And I'm just kind of going back and forth. There, I got it right there. Now this one, I've got a grid line right there, so I can kind of follow that. And that goes, let's see, that's good there. Now this looks off to me. This doesn't look like 9.5 and this being 8. And part of that might be if these like I said, if these vanishing points are too close, you'll get some distortion. That's where you got to cheat a little bit. Remember, this is just a concept sketch to show your client. So when we do a larger perspective, we'll probably use a grid and get it nice and accurate. But this is close enough for this. So this point right here is actually right here, and there's a little bit of an overhang. Now this is so far in the distance compared to this that it's just going to be a little bit of an overhang. See that? And then from this corner, this goes back to the vanishing point, and you can see it in this view because you're seeing the underneath side of it. So that's it right there. And again, ink this very accurately, no rulers. It's going to have a fresh look when it's freehand, and it looks more uncomputer generated. I did some computer design, and the client I was working with says, well, gee, look at you used a computer program. I could have done that. All I got to do is press a couple buttons. Okay, so you got that darkened in with ink. Now the bottom. So just pick any line and just go a little bit below your horizon line, just a little bit. Okay, so this is going to go up to the vanishing point. Make sure it's not going up this direction. It's leading right to the vanishing point. Okay, then to the left, I've got a grid line there. Back to the right for this one. And I just happen to have a coincidental vanishing point right there. And that's it. Look at the dramatic effect you get with this. And part of it is if we spread these vanishing points out, it'll be a little more realistic. But this is a little bit. It's verging on distortion. But I love the dramatic effect. I mean, when you look at this, it might appear like, wow, that thing's gigantic, which it is. It's 9'6". You got 18. It's 19 foot tall. So it is quite a ways up in the air. Okay, so that's you should have variations of the two perspectives, and I think yours is going to look a little bit like this one, or a little bit like this one. Okay, with the 20-footer on top, or two 20-footers. Okay, so right now it's about 10:45 my time. So I'm going to post this on YouTube, and I'm going to send the link. And then tomorrow morning, I'll do the rendering. I don't need to do the floor plan anymore. I've already demonstrated that. That's a lot easier than the perspective. Okay, thanks for watching. Hope this helped.